I'm a guy that's 24. Each day I build some more. I like episode 7 and episode 8. I'm Rich Boy J. Hello boyos, Rich Boy J here back in with another video, and this is going to be a mock review of the Cave God UCS minifig scale Upsilon class shuttle, also known as Kylo Ren's command shuttle. This beauty is around 3 feet tall. It actually has a little under 5,800 pieces, and you can find the instructions for this beauty on rebrickable.com. I'll include that link below. They cost 50 euros, and I think it's well worth the price because this model is exceptional. The wings do fold out as you see in the films, and they have an impressive 6-foot wingspan. So if you'd like to see how that works on this model, stay tuned to the video. The Upsilon shuttle design has to be one of my favorites of the new Star Wars films. I think it's actually one of the first vehicles you see in this era of Disney films, and I think immediately when it takes the screen, it just has such a commanding presence due to its intimidating black color, that piercing red windscreen, and of course, its giant wings. This build breaks down to 5 basic sections, the first being the body. You have the 2 lower halves of the wings and then the 2 upper halves of the wings. The wings are mirror builds. In fact, they're pretty large mirror builds, so that's something to consider. I found when I was going through the second lower half of the wing, it was dragging a bit just because those sections are so big, but once you get them fully completed, once you're especially towards the top halves of the wings, those builds actually progress pretty quickly, and it's very fulfilling when you actually see this model come together because those wings are such an important part of the aesthetic. Honestly, can't stress how well this build comes together, especially just with the detail and coloring. Like, this has to be the largest build I've done with almost exclusively black pieces, yet there is just so much detail incorporated into this thing that, I mean, if I went over every individual detail that is added into it, that would make this video significantly longer, but I thought I'd just give you guys some camera shots to really get to appreciate all the details that he's included in this, including, you know, the lights on either side of the cockpit. There's all these angles that are actually represented on the top of the model, which is super important because anyone looking at this would probably be like, this is the most visible part of the vehicle, I would imagine. I really do like the use of these black levers. I think they just represent nice like piping or tubing on the surface of the model, and especially when they're angled like this at the top on either side, I just think it looks really nice. One of the most important things for me for this model to capture, especially since, you know, I'm probably gonna put this in a mock at some point, not sure what, but I'd be crazy not to, was this scene right here, the ability to have Kylo Ren coming from the ship using that boarding ramp, which does actually go up and down, so you can see I can close it like that, fits pretty flush against the ship, and then I can let it down and Kylo fits under there. That's super important. On the Lego set, Kylo Ren Shuttle just isn't big enough to capture this at all, even though they include a boarding ramp. The build itself just isn't tall enough to actually fit a minifig under there, but having Kylo Ren posed under the main body section of the build looks just right, and it makes me really happy. There is also just a ton of detail on this thing on the back. I think the engines in particular look pretty incredible, especially with these tread pieces that go around them. That was actually a really nice touch, kind of an unconventional building technique using these treads around the wheels, but it looks really good and gives it, you know, a look that you really couldn't have achieved with any other combination of pieces. So I did really appreciate that. And then here's just a better look at some of the details on the back of this model. I especially love this view. I think once Kylo Ren leaves Jakku, you kind of see the ship from the back area. Of course, the wings are spread out, but those 2 engines just look so familiar to me, and seeing it represented so well in Lego just makes me appreciate this model even more. Like, Pete did such an outstanding job with just the part selection on this build, ensuring that everything looks as it should. And there is also an interior, which you guys know is super important for someone like me who likes a bit of playability with the models that I build. And I love the fact that he's incorporated the 2 pilot seats, and there's actually room behind them for Kylo Ren to be standing with Hux, just basically recreating the scene from The Last Jedi when he's ordering them to fire on Luke Skywalker, and I love the fact that I can recreate this scene so much. One of the things to consider is you do have to lean these pilots back a little bit to get the top to actually fit on this. I've actually modified mine slightly. I took off a plate that was right here to basically give a little bit more clearance for their heads. If you don't do that mod, you can still fit them, you just have to lean them back a little bit further. I wanted to have them, you know, leaned up as close as possible to the console sitting here to make it look nice. You know, while they are leaning slightly back, they're not like comically leaning back, meaning, you know, it doesn't look unrealistic or anything, but for them to basically to maintain this pretty slim form factor towards the front of the build, I can kind of understand why, you know, you weren't able to have them sitting straight up, which I don't mind at all. I think that you shouldn't necessarily have to compromise the outside aesthetic of the build, especially when that's primarily what people are going to be seeing for the inside of it, so I actually don't mind that. There's a door represented right here at the back of the cockpit, and then behind that is really just nothing. It's kind of just supposed to be like, you know, Technic beams and such that you'd use for the build. But what this is actually is this access to the ramp, so you can see it's folded down right now, and then it folds up, and those actuators kind of come up into the builds. One of the things I absolutely love about this build is that there's an equal amount of detail represented on the bottom of it as there is on the top, which is what you want out of a premium model like this. There's all the correct angles represented, all the correct greebles represented, and it just looks awesome. Like when you're assembling this thing initially, there's some pretty cool techniques to get all the bottom parts of this connected to the main frame, and it's all sturdy. It all holds together pretty well. Like for a model that has a relatively small body compared to its large wings, it's pretty sturdy, I would say, which is fantastic. This build really is just a great combination of detail and large panels. Like, of course, the wings are so big and so flat, so you're going to be placing a lot of large panels, but the detail is certainly there as well. There's greebles on either side of the wings, and there's actually different details on the reverse side. It's also worth mentioning that the side of the wings have some pretty incredible detail as well. One thing you'll notice about this build are the usages of just large tile pieces, and you'll see these like all around the build, those 8x16 tiles. I actually took a few shortcuts and ended up replacing a lot of those with 1x4 tiles because these were pick-a-brick parts, and I figured I could save quite a bit of money because those 8x16 tiles are not cheap pieces. They're usually used for UCS set plaques, which means they're usually only in more expensive sets. So this is the alternative I took. It ended up being cheaper. I will say that I think that the solid just black panel looks a little bit better than this, but once you kind of look at it from afar, those lines aren't as noticeable, and I think that it was well worth the money I saved. At some point, I might go back through and replace those all with the big tiles, but if you're looking through the parts and saying like, oh, there's so many of those panels, you do have the option of just replacing those with smaller black tiles, especially ones like the 1x4s, which are pick-a-brick parts, so you can get those relatively easily. And then here's a look at the inside of the wing. Those are all different details, and they all just come together so well. There's so many just shapes and the usage of wedge plates here to kind of simulate lines going through the wings, kind of like those. And even the rail pieces used, like they just look so good and give these wings, which are just big black slabs, a lot more detail than they otherwise would have. So you have to appreciate that. Displaying this model with the wings open is most likely a two-person job. I was able to get it done just by myself, but it was very tough. It'd be much easier if you have another person to help you out. And it has to be done with these two stands right here. It is just not possible to do it without the stands. Like the wings are just gonna collapse upon their own weight if you try to do so. The two stands don't use too many pieces in their construction, which is nice. Mine are actually not even the correct color. You'll see these are actually supposed to be all black. I had to substitute some colors in just because I didn't have some of the parts, but I wanted to have a stand, so you'll see, you know, if you decide to get this, it'll look much better and more consistent with what we see in UCS sets. My process for getting this thing to sit on the stand is first removing the top halves of the wings. It's just much easier to maneuver that way, and you can put them back on once the ship is angled the way it's supposed to be on the stands. Also putting it on its side, removing the landing gears. This is actually a nice way to just access the bottom of the vehicle. The model is strong enough to sit on one side of the wings if you just have the top halves removed. And also a cool thing about it is the way you construct it is the body first, and you actually build the entire wing assembly, and then you actually connect the wing to the body by lining up some Technic axle or lift arm holes and then sliding some axles through them. Once you get the landing gears removed, you basically just have to lift it and try to slide it into place. One clever thing about the wings is they actually have little like notches that are kind of meant to fit into where the stand is. The hard part about doing this by yourself is just trying to line those up without being able to see it well, because the wings are just so big and you have to kind of line both of them up at once. So while it's not impossible to do by yourself, like as you can see, I've done it by myself, I would certainly recommend it. You would have a much better time if you have another person with you. And just like that, you have the command shuttle with its wings spread in all of its glory. This wingspan is ridiculous. It is around 6 feet. You can see that the wingspan is basically the table that it's sitting on. So if you are fortunate enough to have enough space to display this like this, I certainly don't, you will have an impressive display piece. When this thing comes together, it's one thing to have the wings straight up, but once the wings are fully spread out, it really just shows you how incredible of a model this is, and this is exactly what I wanted from this build. I unfortunately don't have the playset Kylo Ren Shuttle to show you guys to compare it to. I know that'd be a great way to convey the size, but I ended up poaching most of the parts off of mine to even build this model. So if you do have that one, there are actually a decent amount of common parts that will help you knock, some of the many parts you'll need for this one off of the parts list. But if you do want to just quick comparison, take your Kylo Ren Command Shuttle playset, sit it on a 6-foot table, fold the wings out, and look at the difference. Like how close does your Kylo Ren Shuttle get to having the wingspan of basically the entire table? And that should give you a pretty good idea of just how big this build is. The only real negative to this build worth mentioning is that there are some parts missing on the parts list. Nothing too crucial, but basically what ends up happening is they include some detail parts for one wing, but not the same detail parts for the other wing, because the wings are basically mirror builds, and you'll kind of be getting through it thinking, I know I ordered these parts, but why did I only have it for one side and not the other? So I'll be relaying that information to them. Hopefully they can get that fixed if they've not already gotten that fixed. But all in all, this is a model that I definitely recommend. It is one of the most impressive things in my collection right now. I'd say, it's rivaling the ATM6 in terms of just sheer impressiveness of the build. And that's saying a lot, because that ATM6 is a giant, and this thing, I think, holds its own weight up against that. So thank you guys for checking out this review. I absolutely love this build. I am so happy I built it, and I'll see you guys again very soon.